So welcome everyone to Intel's Young Alumni Panel, Navigating Your Career Path. My name is Max Green. I'm a 2020 grad from the University of Oregon, currently a Senior Finance and Strategy Analyst at Intel. I also serve on the PDX Duck Alumni Chapter as the Career Networking Chair. This chapter is partnered with the Duck Career Network to build a series of skill sharing workshops led by UO alumni. And I'm super excited about this one right now. We have V and Lauren coming with us today from Intel as well. V is a senior financial analyst at Intel with experience supporting high volume manufacturing and technology development. Lauren is a business analyst within Intel's supply chain group, has mentored past interns and participated in career development community geared towards recent college grads. So I think both of them are just really great, to talk about their experience at Intel. I know them both, and I think we're very lucky to have them. So for our discussion, we want to talk about, the transition of being a student to that postgraduate career. I think I had a lot of questions when I came out of college. What is it like? And we're here to basically just have an open discussion, go through a bunch of different questions that we can kind of talk about. And we also want to show different, like our experiences and provide clarity around how to be competitive in today's job market, how to make and maintain professional connections without being intimidated, avoid imposter syndrome, and the ways in which our UO experience shaped our career path. So we'll go through a bunch of different discussions and topics. And if you have any questions at all, I'll be moderating this, and we'll look at the Q&A box throughout, and I'll see throughout it, and we can add some questions here or there. So just to kick off the discussions, just from the start, why don't we just do a little intro, just a quick intro, V and Lauren, if you want to just tell about yourself and, when you graduated from UO, and then we can jump into the questions.
Yeah, do you want me to go first, Lauren, or do you want to?
Sure, take it away.
Okay, so I'm also a 2020 grad. I believe all three of us are. So yeah, I've been working at Intel for just over 2 years now, as Max said. I work with our technology development and our high volume manufacturing. I'm specifically a capital analyst, but I have experience in my past role also working as an FP&A and working with operating expenses. Yeah, and have experience also at my time at UO as the Oregon Blockchain Group co-founder, and then also spent time as part of the business honors program as well.
Great. My name is Lauren. Like V and Max both mentioned, I'm also a 2020 grad. So I did the operations and business analytics program at the business school at U of O. I don't even know if it's called that anymore, but that was kind of my concentration, so to speak. And then I interned with Intel between my junior and senior year, and I now work as a business analyst in a supply chain group. So we do a lot of kind of data analytics with things like Power BI, some SQL, and then I support a software delivery team. So my job includes a lot of kind of business requirement documentation and a lot of interfacing between IT and business groups to make sure that IT knows what they're supposed to be building, and then they actually build it and it does the thing that business needed it to do. So that's kind of a snapshot of sort of my background at U of O and what I do now.
Awesome. And a little background about myself. I also work as a capital analyst, financial capital analyst in the manufacturing division and basically the research and development side of the company. Graduated in 2020 as well from University of Oregon. So I thought this was a great panel that we can show some finance, some business analysts, and we can show you kind of a wide spectrum across Intel. So for our first topic that we wanted to talk about, and we really want to gear this towards the students, what is most beneficial to them and what can you take from this talk and actually apply? What are behaviors does it take to be competitive in today's job market as a young professional, and what we have done in our own personal career path? Lauren, if you can start us off and go through that.
I'll take it away on the first question. So I would say from my experience, both as sort of a recent college grad, and then I also am in kind of the internship mentor program and some career development communities within supply chain groups at Intel. So I've heard this from sort of multiple sources and other managers. is that, we talk a lot about skills that you need to be competitive, which are really industry specific, but I think more generally, there are some behaviors that anyone can really practice and put into place that kind of make you stand out. And some of them are really simple. So being really accountable and reliable when you make commitments. And if that means undercommitting and over delivering, that's like a really good place to start. Asking a lot of questions to establish your own understanding of what's happening at the business, which is kind of a distinct balance between the kind of like, I'm young and I don't know anything, and kind of being cocky and thinking you do already know. So the middle ground between those is just to ask a lot of questions, even if it does not make you sound stupid. I think that's something that we worry about when we have questions. It's like, this is a dumb question. I don't want them to think I don't understand, but it's you seeking to understand better, which is way more valuable, I would say, to most managers and employers, as opposed to you kind of like, oh yeah, I totally get it. And then 3 days later, you're asking a coworker, I don't get it at all. So really being forthcoming about that stuff, and then saying yes when opportunities come across your plate, even if it's a bit of a stretch goal for you, calling it as it is, and then saying, but I'd love to work on it. I'd love to learn how to do it and tackle that. This is the support I would need to do that, I think, is another good behavior and not necessarily a skill set. I don't know if you have stuff to add to that.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the keys is, for whatever role you're going for, is you need to understand, of course, what are the baseline skills, like Lauren was saying, that are needed for a role. But beyond that, especially at Intel, like one of the things we focus on is like this idea of being a continuous learner, like having a growth mindset. When you read a job description, you might not know how to do everything on there, but if you have, the baseline skills, you can always learn more and learn how to do those kind of stretch stuff, like Lauren's saying. So, I mean, that you can apply that for yourselves when you're looking at like a job description. There might be some stretch stuff where, you can go online and you can learn the basics about it enough to talk about it in the interview. You can then expound upon that when you get into the actual job and learn how to do it more. I think another thing too is just, you need to also build strong relationships. I mean, for most of you, you're probably worried about, getting that first job versus, what am I going to do when I get there? Like the first part is how do I get there too? And it even continues once you get there, is building strong relationships. If you start early, and instead of, I think a lot of people like to go on LinkedIn, they just send someone one message. It's like, all right, can you help me get a job here? But really, like a behavior that sets you apart is like building strong relationships through planning. If you know there's somewhere you want to get to, you can start interviewing people, learning about what they do, building those relationships with people years ahead of time. So when you apply, you have resources to fall back on. It's same within a job internally. You start a role, you don't know how to do everything, but there's people that have been there longer than you that know how to do whatever you may not know how to do, and you build relationships with those people. They'll help you get through those ramp periods when you're really struggling.
Yeah, I think that's excellent advice for you, Lauren. And I think hopefully this is the tone of the conversation for the audience, is we're trying to be as transparent as possible and try to give you actionable steps that you can help. I think just to add on that is, you think about how you're going to stand out. Typically, when you're working with a lot of people, and you're in a corporate company, you're spending like half your life there and half your life, at home. So the point is you want to work with people that you can get along with, that are kind people and respectful and competent. So it goes a long way to be kind and to show that extra appreciation for people's time, that when you develop a relationship and you network and you talk to somebody, that you say thank you for the advice, or you follow up with them, or you say, I learned something and I applied it somewhere else, in a sense. And that helps you stand out. And then also, V touched on this, is having the baseline skills that you need for whatever role you're in. And then once you're in that role, majority of the time, you're just going to continue to learn and they're going to teach you. But you have to have some level of competency for the type of role that you're in, and have the ability to learn new things, for sure. I want to move on to, second question, which is kind of that beginning part, right? Is like people in the audience are probably saying, all right, that makes sense, Max. All right, V, Lauren, that makes sense. how do I even get there? Like, how do I get a job? I just want a job right now. So how do you put yourself out there to make and maintain professional connections through both in-person and virtual connections without feeling intimidated? Because that's kind of the first step in order to try to get a job. So is there stuff you want to, touch on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think I'll focus more on from the perspective of a student. But I think the key thing to think about is, for myself personally, when I started the whole networking journey as a freshman, honestly, like it's kind of terrifying when you first start reaching out to people. Again, I'll stress throughout this, but LinkedIn is an amazing source to, talk to people in roles that you're interested in. You talk to these people that are in roles that, you want to get to, you can kind of put them on a pedestal. And in a way, you start treating them as like a superhero or something. You get scared to talk to them. But the reality is, if you take a step back, you can realize that every single one of those people were in the exact same shoes that you were. Every one of them was a student trying to figure out what they wanted to do and what their job was going to be one day, So I think the biggest advantage you have as a student, I'm sure you've probably heard someone tell you this before, but this was one of the biggest tools that I took advantage of as a student, was playing the student card. If you reach out to someone and say, I'm a student, especially if you reach out to a UVO alum and you tell them that I'm a UVO student and I want to learn more about what you do, that's the easiest way to get on a call with someone. And, from there, you have the commonality of U of O and your experiences that you share there. You can easily start building a relationship. So like kind of going back to the first question, you need to build strong connections. That's how you build those strong connections. And the other thing that I think is really important is to be intentional. So it kind of all goes back to having a plan, right? So you can say that maybe I don't know what I want to do, but there needs to be like some plan, right? You can't just say, I don't know what I'm going to do, and then I never reach out to anyone. It could be like, okay, I don't know what I want to do, but I heard someone in my family does this job field. Maybe that would be interesting. Let me go find someone in my family that has a connection. Let me go on LinkedIn, find someone who has a connection. I like this company, like for example, if you like Intel, you're at an event with us right now, you could go look us up on LinkedIn after this, send us a message. I heard you on this panel. I'm a UVO student. I'm really interested in Intel. I'd love to learn more about what you do. That's how you start, sowing the seeds. Once you have that plan, you can start narrowing things down, and it just becomes more and more intentional the further you go.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that resonate with that, V. I completely agree. Just to add on, a quick story for me, before I started at Intel, I had never really networked. I didn't know how to do it. And I'll tell a story of how I did it wrong. But basically, I played that student card and I reached out to a bunch of people across multiple different industries. And I said, hey, I'm a UO Duck. I see that you're a UO Duck. You're in a role that I was interested about or wanted to hear more about. And you get on a phone call for 10 to 15 minutes and you prepare questions ahead of time and you have a genuine conversation with someone. They're just another person. And you can learn so much from those conversations, and you compact that over time with more and more people. And you actually get a Rolodex of information, understand, oh, I really don't really want to do this role. I really am interested in this role. And maybe I have a couple people and contacts that I can reach out to later down the line for maybe a referral or something. So it's really important, outside of your coursework, to take that initiative and to find out, what you want to do. There's not really a class for it. And an example of doing it wrong was I had interned at DreamWorks Animation and Finance for my first role ever. I was not a great intern. And I went through the internship and it ended. And the next summer I was looking to come back. And I was like, all right, I want to be a finance intern again at DreamWorks. And I had reached out and basically said, give me a job. I didn't say, how's everyone doing? Love to hear any updates. I just basically said, give me a job. And these are people I worked with for a whole summer. And basically 90% of them never reached back, didn't respond to me. And that was a really valuable lesson to show, these are people on the other side. And, you have to be careful how you manage that relationship. And if you just come in and ask for something right up front, it can put someone on the defensive. So you want to really make a genuine relationship with somebody. And then eventually that can grow to a referral. And then potentially that can lead to you getting into the company.
Think about from your own personal lives, the people that you build genuine connections with, those are the people that you're going to go above and beyond for. when it comes to networking, it's not really just like a numbers game. If you build those solid relationships and like really build like friendships,
Mhm.
you'll be surprised how many of those people will go to bat for you and how far they will go for you. Those are going to be the really valuable relationships for you when you try to find a job. So I mean,
Mhm.
you probably hear a lot of stories of like, oh, my family member, oh, my friend's mom or something like that. That's because you have like a good relationship with that person, so they went to bat for you, you know?
I completely agree. And I think also an add-on to that I'm thinking off the top of my head is part of this question is, okay, I reach out to somebody, I have a contact. How do I sustain that relationship? What value do I bring? And I had really struggled with this for a long time. And I think the value is like you want a mutually beneficial relationship at the end of the day, where you ask about what they're doing, you ask about if there's any things you can do to help potentially. Also, you hear out what their problems are and what they're anything you can add for advice, and also just updating them. Along the progress. Let's say you reached out to someone, asked for advice, and they told you to maybe do X, Y, and Z. And then in like 4 months from now, you reach out again and said, hey, I did X, Y, and Z, and it helped me with this. And they're going to be on the other phone, side of the phone, be like, oh my God, they listened to me. That's
Right.
great.
Yeah.
That feedback loop that you took their advice and it helped. Yeah.
Yeah, my kids don't even
Uh,
listen. They're gonna stay like, I was like, wow, that's amazing. And they'll remember you. And then you start to build that relationship. And I think that's how you can maintain it over a period of time. A lot of great points. And I want to pause there just for the audience. If you have any ad hoc questions, feel free to throw it in. And between questions, I'll be taking a look and we can throw in them as well. But we'll also have like 5 to 10 minutes at the end for questions as well. So, number 3, I think this is, really big. I struggled with this personally. And Lauren, you touched on this. What are ways that we can avoid and work through imposter syndrome to feel like you're adding value to a company? That you come in, you feel like, what am I adding to this company? They're perfect, but how do you get over that imposter syndrome? Because everyone knows that's not really the reality.
Sure. Yeah. So as I just mentioned, I work on a team of people. A lot of them have been at Intel for as long as I've been alive, which can be really intimidating and it can feel hard to add value. So this is definitely something I've had to navigate. But I think, something to keep in mind as students, coming into the workforce is you're the future of these companies and they need fresh perspectives. So a lot of times, maybe large companies, especially, although I'm not sure, infrastructure builds up around people when they've been at the same position for 10, 20 years, and it never really even occurs to them to challenge, why is it this way? How did we get here? Is this actually still the best way to do this? And as an incoming student who's been exposed to some of the recent technology advances, for example, in school, and then also just being alive in the world at the time that you are, without all of this kind of bias and context from being at the company for a long time, you come in and add this really fresh perspective of like, is that actually the best way to do that? And because sometimes there isn't an answer, even at a place like Intel, they're like, oh, actually, probably not. Do you want to go look at that? Sure. And I think we believe that, large companies or really cool companies, even if they aren't large, have everything together. And I don't think that that's true. And there's always room for improvement. That's why all those people have jobs and you aren't any different, in that there's something that you can bring to question, how can we make this better? Why is it like this? Can we improve it? What's in the way for improving it? That kind of thing. And then, as I mentioned before, just asking lots of questions like that. Why is it that way? Is a great question. And if you just keep asking that, you'll get some like really insane answers. Like, well, 30 years ago, Steve had an opinion, right? And that you can be impactful. If Steve was, so can you, basically. And genuinely showing interest in those things, I think is one way to kind of remind yourself that they hired you for a reason. They need people, coming into the pipeline because people are leaving all the time, right? They need fresh blood, so to speak. Your perspective is valuable to them or they wouldn't hire you. And you're more than just a cog, right? They don't hire people just to keep status quo necessarily. That's kind of not the ethos. So whatever you can do to ask those questions, kind of poke those buttons and find out why things are the way they are, I've found is helpful. And I get feedback on that from other people like, wow, I'm really glad that you brought that up. I'm really glad you're asking those questions. That's why we need people like you here. That kind of feedback is also very validating when you're worried about it and you're possibly in your 20s and you're surrounded by people who've worked there, for much longer than you have. If you do what you do well and you ask questions with a spirit of trying to improve the lives of your coworker, the functions of your team, even if it's not like, I'm going to go save Intel $2 million this year, that's a pretty lofty goal. Not all of us can work jobs where that's possible. But like, wow, Anita, your job seems really boring and tedious. Does it have to be that way? Can I help you make it not that way? Which is improvement for your team. And then also comes back to that relationship building that we were just talking about. So
That's really good points. Absolutely.
That's what I've got.
What about you?
Yeah, Lauren's right. I mean, like a big reason why they're bringing you in these entry role positions is that fresh perspective. I don't know if this is just me, but when I started at Intel, I think one of the big things that led to me having imposter syndrome was this idea that like you need to know everything on day one. I always thought like going in day one, like they're gonna expect me to know everything, even like going through the interviews. I'm like stressing out, like they're gonna expect me to hit the ground running, and what you realize once you join, and the reality of any role you're gonna join, is that there's this ramp process that you go through. And specifically at Intel, Intel Finance, you could be looking at a 4 to 6 month ramp to be really completely into your role before you're really owning everything. Because the roles are just so large. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it too is just that people get ahead of themselves too, of what they think they need to know too. So a lot of it is staying aligned with your manager. Because I hear a lot of people when I talk to them when they're starting at Intel or starting elsewhere too, is they think they need to know everything, right? But the reality is they haven't had those like open conversations with their manager of what are their manager's expectations of where they should be at what time, right? And like when you're starting a new role, that should be kind of something you're talking about on the front end with your manager. Is what does my ramp plan look like? By month one, what do you expect me to own? What should I know? Maybe if you've had that conversation and you're not following the timeline, maybe you should be feeling some kind of way then. But if you haven't had that conversation, you shouldn't be stressing yourself out. You should go back and talk to your manager and really have, a clear guideline of where you should be and when. I think that removes a lot of the stress of it.
Yeah, I think those are all great points, Fee. And I think just to echo on both you and Lauren's point, and just to kind of to close it, I also had imposter syndrome. I remember when I came in, we were doing a project that was going all the way up to the C-suite, and I was so nervous. I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Why am I doing this? how am I doing this? And I was working weekends and in retrospect, probably burning myself out. And you have to realize it's different with every company and every role, obviously. So we're just speaking at Intel, but there is this ramp period that you can take the time to learn everything. And instead of trying to eat the pizza in one bite, you can take little bites of it every single day. And then just kind of echoing what, Lauren said is at the end of the day, one of your biggest value adds is the ability to learn new things. And that's what you're learning at school. From my perspective. So majority of the stuff they're going to teach you on the job, there's not like a semiconductor class at they're going to teach you that, right? The acumen and stuff, but the ability to learn new things, go through information quickly, ask a lot of questions, and look for mentors and support along the way to build up your foundation is just really key. And then the funny thing is, like, I had a old mentor tell me, you're just going to be like, one day you're going to blink and be like, oh, I know what this is. You're just going to say it out loud, or you're going to say it out off of work, and you're going to start saying acronyms and everything. You'll be like, oh, I actually do know this stuff.
People will start coming to you for questions, and you'll be a subject matter expert in something. Yep.
Yeah, that's when it really turns over, is when you're like, wow, people are coming to me for questions. So it happens, and it's with every job.
Someone will ask you something, you'll start with a deep sigh because the depth of your knowledge is so great.
Yeah, it's a whole process, but it does happen. It just takes time. I want to, we had a couple questions from the chat, so I wanted to throw these in here, and I think they're related. So one question is how much do you guys feel like you knew beforehand versus what you learned on the job? Like maybe percentages, like what you learned at school that you actually used versus what you did at the job. And we can be maybe a little too transparent here.
I can take that if you want.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Take a
Yeah,
stab at it
for
first.
just being like really transparent, probably like 95% of it I didn't know. I mean, I feel like the
Nice.
real skills that I brought in, like hard skills, were just Excel, to be honest.
Mhm.
But what I brought in were those soft skills, and like I think the big thing at Intel specifically is like having the ability to work in ambiguity. So for
Yeah.
me, I thought like one of the best things that I did was co-founding Oregon Blockchain Group. And I think for any student is being involved in student-run organizations. And if you can find a leadership role within one of those organizations, it's kind of like being in an entrepreneurial mindset as well. Because you know, really every day, you know, I've been in my current role for a year. There's still new stuff that comes up where you don't know how to do it, and you're just having to learn from scratch. You're building processes from scratch. You know, you really have to be able to just be a continuous learner.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Lauren, you want to touch on that?
I feel like I knew 20%. I feel like 2080
That's a
was
lot.
probably
Good.
my split.
I think you're
I feel
smarter
like
than me,
20
Lauren.
I don't think that I was.
Oh,
I think probably because there was kind of Excel and I was really strong in that. So I was like, I totally got this. But yeah, the exact job, the acronyms, etc. Like you just aren't gonna know. You're gonna have to learn when you get there. Like Max mentioned, what you're learning in school is how to learn. Just learn how to Google stuff. That's my best advice, honestly. Some of my best advice. Like learn how to Google the way that IT help Googles, because that'll get you most of the way there with what your coworkers don't have time to walk you through. But yeah, I'd say 2080 probably.
yeah, and maybe I'll just be I'll join the herd and I'll go in the middle. I'd say probably like 90-10. I think generally you want to have those baseline skills like the Excel skills, knowing financial terms and understanding that specifically, knowing how to present in like a PowerPoint. I think that's huge. But the real skill set that I learned in college was, and also knowing how to collaborate with multiple different people of different backgrounds. I think that's huge. But the ability to learn new things, I think just echoing what I just said is like just, and what V said and what Lauren said, just learn the ability to learn new things and continue to grow and pick that up is the biggest thing. And they're going to teach you majority of the stuff on the job. So I think that's like the main thing, I would say. So it's not as much as unfortunately maybe you would think. It's maybe not 50-50, at least from our experiences. So we have another quick question. This kind of gets right to the heart of it. You know, how did you get your jobs? It says, Lauren, looks like you had an internship. Was it all through Handshake? Do we want to just talk just kind of very briefly how we got our jobs, you know, that we can talk about?
I can start that. So as I mentioned, I did have an internship. I did not, I think I technically applied through Handshake, but that internship was basically advertised at one of the kind of like speaker series events on campus. So Intel, at least at one point, I'm not sure what they do now, but at one point, Randy Eck and Isabella used to come to the College of Business twice a year and kind of recruit lightly, basically, from the business school. So I went to one of those events to kind of get their spiel, like see the slide deck, hear what they had to say. I met them and got the internship, interviewed with them that weekend, that kind of thing. So I did have an internship, but that was really predicated on attending one of those sort of industry speaker events on campus.
Great to know. What about you, V?
Yeah, so I actually didn't do the internship, and kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier about intentionality. So, you know, I knew from freshman year starting at U of O that I wanted to work at Intel. You know, I'd grown up driving past the campus that I work at now. So I always knew I wanted to work here. So I spent a lot of my time networking across people in Intel finance, and then also trying to, you know, find the right recruiter that could help me with. And the irony was I could never find that right person. And I was actually talking to one of my friends about how, you know, I'd been trying to find the right recruiter, And it turned out that friend actually, their dad was a VP in Intel Finance. So I hopped on a call with him, shared with him my resume. We had a discussion. And next thing I knew, I was in the interview process.
Mhm. And I
And
think,
here we are.
and here we are.
Working at its finest.
And I think this is great because it shows three different perspectives, right? So mine's different from that too. So I was not a prior intern. I had prior internship experience that related to my role. So that may have gave me a little leg up potentially. And I had networked. I went to a networking event, like a job shadow, this maybe 4 or 5 months before, which I don't think they do anymore at UO, unfortunately. And I had met a couple of the analysts that are currently still at the company, developed a relationship with them, and they were able to give me a referral to get into an interview. I think that's how it happened. But I think all three of us have very different perspectives, and this shows that there's multiple ways to shave a cat. I guess that's the right expression, maybe, hopefully. I don't
In
know.
a cat, but yeah.
Yeah, close enough.
Yeah, close enough. End of the day. Sorry, guys. But there's multiple different ways that you can get into a company. It's not just one way. Okay, so I think we have another question here. How do you create your own path and advocate for yourself when there are no other clear answers? Because sometimes it's really hard when you're starting off and you don't even know what your path is, especially in a big company. Lauren, do you want to lead us with that one?
Sure. I think it can be really intimidating coming into the workforce, and there's no more degree plan, right, for what you're supposed to do next. And I at least as a graduating student was really focused on like, I need a job. That was the goal, right? And once I had one, everyone was like, great. So like, what are your career goals? What are your aspirations in the next 5-10 years? I was like, I was really focused on getting here. So I don't know. So that's been a bit of a challenge of mine. For example, I think it's like really easy to get the blinders on when you're, freshly graduated or about to graduate, or you're still in school, because that's kind of the next big one. But yeah, there's no more plan. Once you get there, there's no one telling you really what to do next. Some positions have pretty straightforward progressions. I'm not sure if the finance analysts are like this, but I'm imagining you might have like entry-level junior and then senior, and then sometimes they go 1, 2, 3, like analyst 1, 2, 3 is a pretty common structure, but not all jobs are like that. And you might be an analyst for a year and decide that you don't want to do that forever. And you don't want to get to analyst 3. So at least at Intel, it being a really large company and they promote a lot of retention, I think they try pretty hard to make sure that you don't leave. So if you don't like your current job at Intel and you are willing to look for another job, there's lots of opportunities. And so I think, when it comes down to that, asking other people that you work with, people whose job touches your job, what is your job like? What do you do every day? And that kind of, calling it out to people, meeting them, getting a sense for what their job is, both laterally on your same level, and then also go up, go diagonally, sort of get a sense for what's out there. And then you can kind of start to move that direction once you have a better idea of what people's roles are actually like. You don't necessarily have to love your job, but it shouldn't be something that you like dread doing on Monday. I would say, aim for stuff that you're good at and provide some interest to you. A really good thing to consider is how much do you like your work life to be really routine? So every day I come in and I do X, Y, and Z. And then in the afternoon, I do A, B, and C. And then every week I do this, and every month I do this, and every quarter I do this. I'm sure that sounds familiar for the finance guys over here. Or do you want to work more in a project setting where there's always something new on the horizon and it's different all the time? So that's, I think, something to think about when you're sort of creating your own path and advocating for what you want in your career. And then I think the other thing is accept a lot of side work is what I did. So I'll be honest, my original job was pretty boring, pretty transactional, like a lot of entry level jobs can be. And it didn't also require all of my time. So one of the things that would happen would people would come by and say, hey, I need someone to spend 2 hours a week on this. I can't pay a whole person to do it. Do you have anybody? To my manager. My manager would come ask me, do you have time? Are you interested? And I would be like, sure. And I got a lot of alternative experience outside of my core job function by saying yes to those kinds of side project opportunities, and kind of just like pitching in to task forces, to ROI projects, to savings initiatives, things like that that come up, data governance groups, that kind of thing, where they need bodies and representatives from different teams. So I would say yes to side work, and then really ask people what they do. Because another thing that you might notice, even as a student, when you try to talk to people in your sort of networking endeavors, is you'll ask people what they do and they'll tell you your job title. And that doesn't actually tell you anything about what they actually sit down and do for 8 hours a day. And so I would encourage y'all to actually ask, what does a typical day look like for you? What does a typical week look like for you? And not just, what do you do? Because they'll say a lot of words that don't actually mean much. So ask really specifically when you're trying to get a sense for what you want or want next. I mean, my advice.
That's very good advice. I completely agree. V, would you like to kind of round that out?
Yeah, I think the key for me is really the idea of just trying new things. You don't learn about what you like and what you don't like unless you try new things, and even like within your own specific role. You know, for me, my career progression has come through trying new things. So like Lauren was saying, when a project comes your way, instead of saying, okay, that's not part of my job, that's not my job scope, you could view it as an opportunity to take on a new scope and develop new skills, try new things, right? You can find out, I actually like this, like Lauren was saying, you know, I took on new projects and I like this more than my core role. You learn more about yourself. And I think even applying that to yourselves more as students too is, you don't have to be in a job and try new things within just an internal company. You can try new things just through the idea of like job shadowing. You know, for myself, my first internship that I got was at the Oregon State Treasury. And that started as a job shadow and just going to the office to meet people. You know, like you can try new things and learn about your path. I mean, you can be completely lost, right? But if you start trying things, you start learning about what you like, what you don't like. And the job shadow is something I would highly recommend. And I think you'll find it's quite easy to actually get a job shadow with people. You know, a lot of the time when you reach out to people on LinkedIn as a student, they're expecting you to ask for an internship, especially at smaller companies. I really noticed this when I was a student too, is if you ask them, you know, you have a conversation or two with them and you ask them for a job shadow, most people are more than happy to have a student come in and watch them for a day or two. And you can, like Lauren was saying, you know, you ask someone what their job title is, it tells you almost nothing, right? Imagine you get to go watch that person do their job for a day or two. You get amazing insight. You get to see what they actually do from day to day, and you have their attention for 8 hours for how many days you show up. You know, you can be asking questions the whole way, and you can be making more than one connection. If you get brought into the office, that's an opportunity to network with everyone in an office.
No, I think that's great. I completely agree with that. And I think the common thing is you take that initiative. That's all it is. You have to really take that initiative as a student. I think I'll just add a quick little point. Find mentors, find people that you can connect with and talk to, and ask off the record questions. And you can ask them, you know, you did this, this, and this. Were you happy with this? Or what would you have done differently and why? And you can start to form your own opinions after you talk to a lot of people. And definitely just being curious is really important, for sure, because everyone's still figuring it out. I've talked to some of my mentors that are high up in the company at Intel, and they're still figuring it out. So it's like there's no clear answer you're going to get, but you can get a lot of opinions, and then you can form your own answer that can help you carve that path as best as possible, that you're not just coming in blindly. But even if you come in blindly, that still isn't, there's still strategy, and sometimes that works as well. So
yeah, you don't have to be working towards a final form. You can be working towards whatever is next.
Right.
It doesn't have to be like, I want to be senior VP of finance wherever, and like that be your goal. And you're like, how do I get there? You can, that's one way to go about it. But you could start and go, okay, now what's next? Where do I want to go next? And lots of people, at least at Intel that I've heard of, move diagonally and laterally all the time. I've known people who started as software engineers, or tool owners in the fab, right? They come out with engineering degrees they own big, huge pieces of capital equipment. They're responsible for them. Then after 2 years, they're like, no, and they go work in HR. People move all over the place all the time. So it's okay to not have your big, grand lifetime career goal in your mind if you just want to look at what's next.
I know we're almost like 9 minutes, 9 minutes left. So I kind of wanted to get a couple of the questions of Q&A, and we can circle back to our last question. But we had a question where did you all know exactly what you wanted to major in and where you wanted to go with that major after college? Maybe we can do maybe a little quick, semi-quicker answers, but not, I take your time.
Yeah, do you want me to go first, Lauren?
Sure.
Yeah.
I knew I was going to be a business major. I came in and I stuck with that. I didn't know what I wanted to do within that. I actually figured I would actually be more in a finance role. And then I took an Excel class. I was like, this is for me. So I went into business analytics and basically got, the business college's pre-data science degree is kind of what I call it. And I didn't really know what that was going to look like career-wise, but it's been pretty consistent. I got a business degree in operations and business analytics. I am a business analyst, and I am also in a grad program for business analytics. So I've had a lot of consistency in that respect.
Yeah, so for myself, I knew I wanted to do finance coming into college, but I actually thought I wanted to do investment finance. And through a lot of my networking and my internship at the Oregon State Treasury, I especially learned that, working for the government wasn't something I was interested in. It was a bit too slow for myself. So, I went on the completely opposite side of the spectrum. I went to Intel. So yeah, I wanted to be able to actually impact the strategy and the operations of a company versus analyzing them. That's what I realized just through the experiences I gathered.
Yeah, and I think for me, I wasn't a straight path. I switched my major multiple times, from like econ to computer science to almost PR for a hot minute, and then back to finance. And I knew I really liked numbers and kind of the background of a business. And through internships, I kind of figured out, okay, this is kind of the area I wanted to go in, and this is, I think, what I'm also good at, which is some of the advice I give is maybe do something you're really good at where you have some passion towards as well. That's what kind of led me to where I'm at. So we have our final question, and then we can see for other questions from the audience. But how has the UO experience shaped our panelists' educational and professional paths? Basically recommendations for current students from our UO experience and what we've done at the UO.
Yeah, do you want me to go for that?
Yeah,
Yeah, sure. So I think the big thing for me, I already touched on this, was a lot of it's going to be becoming a continuous learner. And depending on the role, but a lot of companies, a thing that's really valued is the ability to work in ambiguity. I think the best place to get those kind of skills is through the different clubs that in organizations we have on campus. So, for myself, I'm more familiar with the business school opportunities, but I really believe the different groups like OCG, for example, or blockchain group or the investment group, these are all really great opportunities to, get leadership experience, learn how to work with other people on projects, how to work in ambiguity to a certain extent, and also learn how to continue learning. You might be learning stuff outside of the classroom, right? So I really think taking advantage of those opportunities on campus are really going to set you apart when you go to the job market, and especially it's going to give you skills that will help you once you start your first job.
Really good points.
Yeah.
What about you, Lauren?
To be honest, I did not have a lot of involvement in extra clubs. So really my experience was shaped by a couple of professors who I think really gave me a lot of insight into kind of the world that I was stepping into career-wise. So relationship with your professors, that's like a classic piece of advice, right? As I mentioned, I got that internship. I met the interviewers at a speaker industry event. So actually attending those, I think there's definitely value to them for networking, just to learn more about the companies, all of that good stuff. And then let's see, those are really probably the main two things that were sort of university centric. Oh, I also participated in the job shadow program that Max mentioned, although it wasn't with Intel, it was actually with Thermo Fisher Scientific. But that was also really informative because I found out I did not want to be a project manager. So that was another experience that I utilize, from the school. Those are the big ones for me. Yeah, it's not a very long list, sadly, but
I felt good. I think there's a lot of great points.
That's what I've got.
I think for me, I think it's probably teachers as well. I had a couple really good teachers. Chuck K, who was the first intro class I had in business school, really taught me a lot of discipline. I think that was huge for me, and I had to put a lot more effort in my coursework. And he was fair and tough with me, and I learned a lot from him. I also had another teacher, Kate Harmon, who's no longer, unfortunately, at the school, but was the entrepreneurship head. And just picking her brain and hearing different advice from her, that was really impactful. So I think, in summary, is lean on your teachers. They know a lot, and they want to help you. So go out and spend that extra 15 minutes, 20 minutes in office hours or after class to try to talk to them and ask them questions. They can give you a lot of advice, and they also have contacts, which is really helpful. And then, and I think Lauren mentioned this, is just that job shadow program was really helpful for me to just figure out what I wanted to do, and switching my major a bunch of times to figure out, eliminating paths that I didn't want to do. And every student has that ability, hopefully early on in their academic career, to do that and switch multiple times to see what path they can do and what they want to do, because they're testing out different courses, for sure. So I just want to, wrap up and just first off say thank you so much to Lauren and V. These are favors, that I really appreciate that they took the time to do this and got through this. And hopefully it was really beneficial to the audience. And there also will be a recording of this later for people to go back and listen to. And, I'll speak for myself. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Hopefully, also people can reach out to V and Lauren if they want to follow up and ask questions. And they're also doing this. We're not getting paid to do this. We're here to go through and to try to give you advice, because we've all been in those shoes before. And look on have a look out for future events for the UOAA, and we'll have other skill sharing workshops like this in the future. And again, just want to thank V and Lauren for taking the time to do this, and hopefully it was beneficial for everyone.
Max for setting it all up.
Thank you, Max, doing all the hard work.
Thank
you, Megan.
You show up and get to talk.
Exactly. All right, well, take care, everyone. Thank you for joining, and hope you learned a little bit. Okay, bye, everyone.
Awesome. See
Good
you.
night, everybody.